I couldn't believe my damn ears. They were right there in front of me, laying down the news like they cared about my well-being. Yeah, right. As if they gave a damn about how I'd take it. Sure, I'm not the most touchy-feely guy around, but that doesn't mean I'm made of stone. I've got feelings, deep ones, and this hit like a sledgehammer to the gut. The pain was like a beast, gnawing away at me until everything just went black. Growing up in the Midwest, I was the quiet kid. At least, that's what my folks say, and from what I remember, they're spot on. I've always been reserved, cautious even, by everyone else's standards. Smart and pretty, they'd call me. But those compliments didn't always land the way you'd think. Especially not when Mrs. Jensen decided to broadcast to the whole sixth grade class, "Jimmy Quayle, you're the most gifted student I've had in 16 years. Yeah, thanks for that, Mrs. J. Nothing like a target on your back to make school life hell. Kids hate a curve wrecker, and that made me crawl even deeper into my shell. My brother Brett, 2 years my senior, was my lifeline. He'd drag me into his world, unless his buddies had a problem with it. Then he'd try to let me down easy. Brett was the extroverted athlete. I was the introverted brainiac. We weren't vying for the same slice of attention from our parents. But when we did, 9 times out of 10, the athlete beat the bookworm. College was a game changer. Intelligence finally had currency. I was there on a full ride, and suddenly, being the smart, good-looking guy had its perks. I blitzed through college a year early, had a string of decent relationships, some just friendly, some a bit more. I wasn't Casanova, but I held my own. By graduation, I figured I was doing all right. At least, that's what my girlfriends told me. Then came Giselle. Second year working for the company. Yeah, the CIA, the big leagues in D.C. We met at some bar in Georgetown. Normally, bars are where bad decisions are born, but this time was different. It was an engagement party for mutual friends, not a meat market. For me, it was love at first sight, the kind of thing you think only happens in movies. Giselle seemed into me too. Fast forward, we ditched the bar to talk somewhere quieter, dated for 3 weeks, and 3 months later, we were hitched. My first date with Giselle was a revelation, the kind of moment that could only lead one way. Fast forward to date 4, and the tension was thicker than a Tarantino plot twist. Giselle played the game like a maestro, friendly enough to keep things smooth, yet she barely touched the booze. It was all about those non-verbal cues like a silent film star. She pressed against me, her big brown eyes practically screaming submission. No need for words like, "let's get intimate," or "I need you." She was broadcasting it loud and clear in every other way. When we finally made it to my apartment, there was no striptease, no rush to the bedroom, just a look that said, "Whatever you want, it's yours." By morning, after breakfast and a drive home, she sealed it with a kiss and a line straight out of a pulp novel. "Thank you so much, Jimmy. You are so kind and gentle. Do whatever you want to me, whenever you want." That was Giselle, subtle yet unmistakable in her intentions. Not the kind of girl for a guy who needs things spelled out, but perfect for me. Giselle's backstory? Straight out of a tragic noir. Parents passed away. Her only emotional anchor was her sister Melly. Melly lived up in Northern California, and their connection was mostly over the phone, save for a couple of visits between our first date and our wedding. Speaking of the wedding, it was a low-budget affair, maybe 30 guests. My brother Brett, my best man, took a liking to Giselle right away, telling me how lucky I was every chance he got. Melly was the bridesmaid, but she was more of a shadow, not around much during the festivities. When I finally met Melly, it was a bit of a shock. Thick glasses, a lazy eye, things you don't catch in photos. Giselle mentioned her eyesight was bad, but seeing it was different. If you squinted, you might see a family resemblance. But Melly was nowhere near as pretty. She had about 7 kilos on Giselle's lithe frame and an aura that was more bookish than bombshell. The honeymoon in Aruba was phenomenal, a kaleidoscope of sun-soaked days and sultry nights. Giselle's intimate compliance reached a new level, her submission almost surreal. But the tropical dream quickly dissolved into a gritty reality as soon as we got back. A CIA analyst like me should have seen the red flags when Giselle moved in after only 6 weeks. She seemed to shrug off renting an apartment, claiming part-time work that let her leave anytime. The truth? She was on the brink of eviction, drowning in debt from credit cards and student loans. Even her degree didn't help her manage money. It all went down the drain, including funding her sister Michelle's trip to Washington. Post-wedding, I swiftly separated our finances, handing her a single low-limit credit card under my watchful eye. We toiled to chip away at her debts and loans, but progress was slow, hindered by her bi-monthly flights to see Michelle. Despite the financial quagmire, our marriage thrived on an emotional and physical plane. Giselle was my sanctuary, always available, always compliant. Making love to her felt so damn good, and her sweet words and cuddles were a balm to my weary soul. Then, out of the blue, my brother Brett took a job in D.C., moving just 2 miles away from our Northern Virginia apartment. He was a frequent visitor, always soaking in our hospitality. Giselle's sweetness toward him didn't go unnoticed. She folded him into our little family with ease, her warmth genuine. But trouble brewed beneath the surface. 6 months in, a loan I had no clue about reared its ugly head, with the bank threatening legal action. Around the same time, Giselle's office cut her hours, supposedly due to budget cuts, but I suspected her frequent trips to see Michelle were the real culprit. We had countless conversations about our finances, Giselle always apologizing, but never really helping to solve the problem. She'd hug me, bat those big brown eyes, and submit, letting me do whatever I wanted, thanking me profusely afterward. But when the bank filed a claim, I knew drastic action was needed. An evil corporation, name redacted due to a confidentiality agreement, offered me a job that paid 4 times my current salary. The catch? It was in the Middle East. Giselle didn't flinch. She wrapped her arms around me, eyes gleaming with trust. "Do what you have to do, Jimmy," she whispered. "I'm here, waiting for you." Her words hung in the air like a promise, a pledge sealed with her unwavering submission. As I prepared to step into the heart of darkness, her image burned in my mind, a beacon in the chaos to come. Giselle and I had plenty of heart-to-heart conversations about the future. She promised me our love could survive anything, especially with Evil Corp's deal. 2 weeks of R&R every 4 months, and I could whisk Giselle anywhere in the world. With a mix of dread and excitement, I left my old company, joined Evil Corp, and convinced the bank to hold off on the lawsuit, promising a chunk of my new salary would go straight to them to pay off Giselle's debt. The Middle East was a whole new beast. Sure, the analysis work was familiar, but being trapped in a fortified bunker, needing an armed escort to step outside, made it a different kind of hell. My gut told me my work wasn't exactly humanitarian. It was about lining Evil Corp's pockets with taxpayer money. But I kept my sanity by emailing Giselle daily and calling her weekly. Her voice was my lifeline, her emails my anchor. When our first R&R rolled around, we tore through Hawaii like it was our personal playground. We left the islands exhausted but blissful. Her back to Virginia, me back to the Middle East. 5 months in, I got a promotion, making 6 times my old salary, all tax-free. I funneled the extra cash into a Cayman Islands account, a rainy day fund for when this storm finally passed. The job still sucked, but the money was good. Our second vacation, this time in Athens, was off to a rocky start. Giselle seemed distant, though still eager for intimacy at a moment's notice. By the time we hit Rhodes, I chalked it up to jet lag or some emotional fog, brushing it off rather than dissecting it like I would a data set. Months 8 through 12 brought more strangeness. Giselle's emails started showing odd quirks, and during our calls, she'd sometimes zone out, claiming the flu or allergies. My analyst instincts buzzed, but love and distance made it easy to let things slide. As my third vacation neared, she invited me home to Virginia. Perfect timing, I thought. Our finances were finally looking up, debts nearly cleared, and $50,000 stashed away. But when my plane touched down at Dulles Airport, it wasn't Giselle waiting at arrivals. It was my father, his face a mask of concern. Something was wrong, and the nightmare I thought I'd left behind in the desert was about to catch up with me in the suburbs. "Dad, what are you doing here?" I asked, almost stunned. "Hi, Jimmy," he replied, pulling me into a hug. His smile didn't reach his eyes, which were clouded with something like fear. "Mom and I managed to visit and wanted to surprise you. Giselle, Brett, and Mom are waiting for you at your apartment." As we drove home, Dad's small talk was laced with a tension that set my nerves on edge. He kept glancing at me like he wanted to say something, but each time he clammed up. I chalked it up to the stress of travel, but in hindsight, the man was practically radiating panic. My mind was fixed on Giselle. I was bummed there'd be a crowd, but the anticipation of seeing her kept me buzzing. When I walked into the apartment, I knew something was off. Mom, Brett, and Giselle looked like they were waiting for a firing squad. Giselle stood and my heart stopped. She was in maternity clothes. My world tilted on its axis. The conversation that followed is a fragmented blur. Brett's voice droned on. Mom chimed in with the occasional soft word, and Giselle just cried. Their words hammered into my brain. Giselle was 6 months pregnant. But how? I'd seen her only 4 and 8 months ago. Then it hit me. Like a bullet to the chest, Giselle was carrying Brett's baby. The room spun as the implications sank in. My mom's voice pleading, "They didn't want this, Jimmy. Everyone feels terrible. We need to talk it out." I felt my stomach lurch, my vision narrowing. "No, no way in hell," I muttered, standing up as the dizziness overwhelmed me. The next thing I knew, the darkness closed in, and I lost consciousness. The cold, sterile smell of antiseptics and the distant beep of machines filled the room as I slowly regained consciousness. My face throbbed with a dull, relentless pain, a reminder of the mess I was in. My mother, eyes red and puffy, was the only one by my side. As soon as she noticed my eyelids fluttering open, she rushed to my bedside, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Oh, Jimmy, dear, thank God you're awake. Let me call Dad, Brett, and Giselle. They've been desperate to see you," she babbled, fumbling for her phone. "Hold up, Mom," I croaked, my voice rough and unsteady. "How long have I been here?" She paused, concern etched deep in her face. "You had a concussion, sweetheart. You've been in and out of consciousness since last night. It's about 8 in the morning now, the day after your plane arrived." I glanced at her tired eyes. "You didn't sleep, did you?" "No, Jimmy. I was too worried, especially after everything," she replied, gripping my hand tightly. "Mom, please don't call anyone yet," I pleaded, trying to sit up but failing. At that moment, the door swung open, and in walked a no-nonsense doctor and her nurse. "Mr. Quayle, I'm Dr. Jacobs, and this is Nurse Thomas," the doctor introduced herself briskly. She shook my hand before diving into her examination, shining lights into my eyes and prodding my head with clinical precision. "Good to see you awake, Mr. Quayle," she said after a few minutes. "You gave us quite a scare, but it looks like you'll be fine after a few days of rest." "Thanks, Doc," I muttered. "I need to speak with you in private. Mom, could you grab some breakfast? And don't call Dad or my ex-brother or ex-wife, not yet." The word ex hit my mother like a slap, her face paling as she gasped. Before she could protest, I cut her off. "Mom, if you care about me, just do this one thing." Her shoulders slumped in defeat. "Okay, Jimmy," she whispered, retreating with a broken look on her face. The doctor and nurse exchanged a look, curiosity piqued. "Dr. Jacobs, what's the damage to my face?" "You'll need reconstructive surgery on your nose and left cheek," she said bluntly. I took a deep breath. "We have doctor-patient confidentiality, right? So whatever we discuss stays between us." "Correct." They both nodded. "If I'm going under the knife anyway, can I change my appearance?" I asked, a hint of desperation in my voice. Dr. Jacobs raised an eyebrow. "It's possible, but not necessary." "Just recommend the best plastic surgeon in town," I interrupted. She nodded slowly, turning to Nurse Thomas. "Gloria, get Dr. Simon Kent's contact details from the front desk, would you?" "Right away," Nurse Thomas replied, slipping out of the room. With her gone, I leaned in closer to Dr. Jacobs. "Is there any reason I can't be discharged immediately?" "I strongly advise against it. You could faint and cause more damage," she said, worry creasing her forehead. "Is there a way to transfer me to another ward, somewhere with more privacy and tighter security?" I pressed. "If you can make that happen, I'll stay. Otherwise, I'm out of here." She studied my face, then glanced at my hospital card. "I see you have first-class insurance." "Evil Corp has some benefits," I smirked. "I can transfer you to a secure wing for specially protected persons. No one will get through without authorization," she decided, picking up the phone and issuing rapid-fire orders. "The transfer will happen in 10 minutes. "Before my mom gets back?" I asked. "Yes, we'll move fast," she assured me, hanging up the phone with a decisive click. I sank back into the pillows, relief washing over me. This was just the beginning. The pieces were moving, and I was ready to play my hand. The hospital room was a silent battleground, the tension thick as molasses. Just then, Nurse Thomas strutted in, handing me a slip of paper with the name of the plastic surgeon. Thank God I had my essentials wallet, cell phone, and other important items safely tucked away in the fanny pack I clung to like a lifeline. I slipped Dr. Kent's info into the pack, nodding my thanks to the nurse and doctor. True to their word, they moved me to a section for specially protected persons, where no visitors would breach my fortress of solitude. 2 nights passed. The hospital's sterile walls my sanctuary. Evil Corp was footing the bill, so I let the expenses pile up without a second thought. By midday of my first day in hiding, my head cleared, and I switched into analyst mode, plotting my next move. The emotional agony gnawed at me, but I shoved it aside. I had a mission now, claw my way out of this pathetic mess and exact revenge on my ex-brother and soon-to-be ex-wife. I had a brief reprieve from Evil Corp, 11 days to be precise, before they'd come knocking. Plenty of time to quit or wrap up a few projects stateside instead of in the war zone of Iraq. I rented a hotel room, made a hasty appointment through Dr. Jacobs with Dr. Kent, and found myself in his office the next day. After a meticulous examination, he assured me he could either restore my face to its former glory or morph it into something entirely new. I studied the before and after shots of previous patients, zeroing in on one that screamed cute but entirely different. We set the surgery for the next day. Post-op, I spent another night in the hospital, the haze of anesthesia my only companion. The next day, I shuffled back to my hotel room, my face bandaged and throbbing, but my resolve intact. Finally, I dared to check my phone. It was a minefield of messages, mostly from my parents, with a couple from Brett and Giselle. They all clamored for reassurance, desperate to talk. My mother's last message was a meltdown in text form. As much as it pissed me off that she and Dad were holed up in my apartment with the traitors, I could see she was trying to be the peacemaker, hoping to avoid a full-scale family war. I could spare her a bit of sympathy, but not much. I dialed her number, the phone ringing like a countdown to an explosion. She picked up, her voice a shaky mess of relief and panic. "Hi, Mom, it's Jimmy," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. Her voice broke. "Oh, Jimmy, where are you? I've been worried sick. I thought the CIA nabbed you, or worse, that you were dead and the hospital didn't tell us." I cut her off like a bad scene. "Mom, relax. It's nothing like that. I just needed to avoid Brett and Giselle because, honestly, I could have killed them." She gasped, but I steamrolled on. "Mom, listen. Just listen, and don't talk. I'm okay. I'm laying low in a hotel for a few days. Then I'm skipping town to clear my head. I'll see you before I leave." "Where are you, Jimmy? Which hotel?" "I'll come to you now," she insisted, her voice edging into hysteria. "I'm at the Keybridge Hotel Marriott, room 1412. But for the love of all that's holy, don't come now. I'll let you know when. And listen, Mom, under no circumstances are you to tell Dad, Brett, or Giselle where I am. Do you understand?" "But Jimmy, they care about you. They just want to make sure you're okay," she began to mumble, her worry morphing into a motherly drone. "Stop it," I snapped. "Do you understand? You must not tell them. Brett and Giselle are dead to me. You and Dad will be dead to me too if you spill the beans. Got it?" She sobbed into the phone. "So far, so good, Jimmy." "I'll call you in a couple of days," I replied, hanging up before she could drown me in more tears. The plan was in motion, and I had no room for screw-ups. This was my revenge tour, and nothing was going to derail it. The next day, I met up with one of my more eccentric friends from the CIA, a guy I'll call Jay. We rendezvoused on a bench at the mall. Jay was neck-deep in secret ops, the kind that would make your skin crawl. He was legitimately nuts, but hey, who isn't when you're knee-deep in black ops? Jay liked me because during my stint with the company, my intel had apparently saved his life. He wasn't one for drama, so I figured it was true. Bottom line, Jay owed me. I leaned in, lowering my voice like we were in a B-movie spy thriller. "Jay, I need a new identity. Once the bandages are off and my new mug is settled in, I need a passport, a new social security number, the whole 9 yards. Jay took a drag from his cigarette, blowing the smoke out slowly, savoring the moment. "You're asking a lot, Jimmy." I shot him a grin that could cut glass. "But no more than your life's worth, right?" He chuckled, flicking ash off his cigarette. "All right, you got me there, but you won't need this for about a month, yeah?" I nodded. "Okay, give me a list of potential new names and birth dates." "Way ahead of you, Jay," I said, handing him a slip of paper. He glanced at it, stuffed it into his jacket pocket, and pulled out a disposable cell phone. "Swing by every day around 5. I'll let you know when and where for the photo shoot and when everything's ready." "I appreciate it, man. How much is this going to set me back?" He smirked. "I can get you a special discount by calling in a favor. Let's say 10 grand. But that's for my boyfriend, not for me." "Fair enough. You need the cash now?" I asked. "No, just have it ready when the docs are delivered," he replied. We shook hands, sealing the deal like two old-school gangsters, and then Jay melted into the crowd, just another face in the mall. The next afternoon, I was in my hotel room, tapping away on my newly purchased laptop, plotting my next moves. I was expecting room service with my afternoon tea, so when there was a knock on the door, I opened it without a second thought. Big mistake. Standing there was my damn ex-brother, Brett. His eyes widened at the sight of my bandaged face, like he'd just seen a ghost that had gone through a meat grinder. He was sure it was me, though. Jimmy, I know you hate me right now, but we really need to talk about this. I don't want. That's as far as he got. The next thing he knew, my fist was connecting with his jaw. See, while I was usually crunching numbers, I had picked up a few nasty tricks from some ex-military crazies during my downtime in Iraq. Not much, but more than enough to put down an unsuspecting sap like Brett. He hit the floor like a sack of potatoes, groaning but not out cold. I didn't waste time. I grabbed my laptop and some essentials, stuffing them into my new backpack. I checked out of the hotel, leaving Brett sprawled on the floor, a mess of confusion and pain. This little surprise visit meant a change of plans. I called my contact at Evil Corp and met him. I told him I was quitting, but if they forked over a $25,000 bonus, my regular salary, and a month's safe harbor, I'd finish my last two projects. He tried to haggle, but I knew these projects were gold to Evil Corp, so I held firm. He caved, and soon enough, my account in the Cayman Islands had a fresh deposit, and I had the key to one of Evil Corp's safe houses. A week later, I started on the projects. Then I checked the burner phone Jay gave me. There was a message. We'll meet tomorrow at noon at the same place. Don't bring anything. The next day, I found Jay already sitting on our favorite bench. I flopped down next to him. How's it going, Jay? He took a drag from his cigarette, looking like a cat who just ate the canary. Good news and bad news. Which do you want first? I sighed. Bad news first, Jay. Hit me. I can't do it for less than $20,000, he said, exhaling smoke. Wow, I said, eyebrows shooting up. Then the good news better be damn good. He grinned, the kind of grin that usually precedes mayhem. It is. As long as you're cool with the name Justin Reddy, I can get you documents so tight that even you couldn't unravel the truth. Fingerprints, DNA, the whole shebang. Justin Reddy will be in the FBI database and you'll be wiped clean. I laughed, extending my hand. Hello, my name is Justin Reddy. Nice to meet you, Jay snorted. You're unbelievable. I was shooting for 80% protection. But this is bulletproof. Now open wide, time for a DNA swab. He pulled a sampler from his jacket and swabbed the inside of my cheek, sealing it up with a flourish. Same drill as before. Show up every day around 1,700 hours. I'll let you know the time and place for the photo shoot, paperwork, and money transfer. We shook hands, sealing the deal in true Tarantino fashion. Jay disappeared into the crowd, leaving me to mull over my new life as Justin Reddy. Time to step into the shadows and prepare for the next act in this tragic play. Within 3 weeks, I had a fresh identity set in stone, a thick dossier brimming with the backstory of Justin Reddy, and my projects for Evil Corp tied up with a neat little bow. When I met Jay to swap $20,000 in cash for my new documents, he didn't even bat an eye until I spoke. Not only had my face morphed into something unrecognizable, but my hair sported natural blonde streaks, and my blue eyes were now a mundane brown thanks to contacts. If Jay, Mr. Eagle Eyes himself, couldn't spot me, I was golden. Before skipping town, I dialed my mother on the burner phone Jay had given me. Mom, I can't believe you told Brett where I was, I growled into the receiver. Jimmy, oh Jimmy, thanks for calling. I swear, I didn't want to. But Dad convinced me. He thought we could patch things up, keep the family together, she pleaded, her voice cracking. You didn't have to hurt Brett like that. I cut her off, my voice a razor's edge. I don't give a damn. I never swore in front of my mother, and the shock was palpable. I heard her gasp. The family is toast. This call has 3 purposes. First, to tell you and Dad that you're idiots and cheaters. You'll never hear from me again. Second, tell Giselle to file for divorce on the grounds of abandonment. I don't want any of her measly assets, and I've already cleaned out our joint account. Third, tell her I hope she has the most miserable life imaginable. Click. I ended the call, yanked out the SIM card, and crushed it under my heel. Then, being the environmentally conscious fugitive I was, I recycled the phone. The next day, Justin Reddy landed at San Francisco Airport with $60,000 in the bank, a secure laptop brimming with potential, and a devious plan. I found a cheap apartment and an even cheaper office with stellar internet access. Why? Because this was where Giselle's sister, Michelle, lived and worked. My revenge was a dish best served cold, and I was planning a banquet. My new mission was to make Michelle fall head over heels for me, only to leave her shattered, possibly multiple times. Giselle's life would be a living hell if her sister was a wreck, and I couldn't care less about Michelle's feelings. My business plan kicked off without a hitch. I offered free exploratory research projects to companies in the greater San Francisco Bay Area, analyzing whatever data they threw my way. It didn't matter what it was about. My time at Evil Corp had honed my data mining skills to a fine edge. 90% of the companies that took my bait became paying clients. Within 8 months, I had more work than I could handle, all at a juicy hourly rate and with minimal overhead. By the year's end, I was hiring college students part-time to keep the machine running. Financial goals? On track and then some? Justin Reddy was in business, and the wheels of revenge were spinning perfectly. Giselle and Brett had no idea what was coming, but they'd feel the sting soon enough. For 10 months, I played puppet master to Michelle's quiet little life. She was a restaurant hostess with a penchant for lazy weekends, occasionally seen with a lackluster boyfriend. Her half-shut eyes and poor vision limited her activities, making my job easier. Then, a twist in her routine made her more accessible. She joined a health club. Bingo. I signed up, ready to pounce. I introduced myself, buttered her up with praise, and acted like her dedication to fitness was the most inspiring thing since sliced bread. At first, she was cautious, like she sensed something familiar. Maybe she remembered our brief interaction from over a year ago. But with her lousy eyesight and my new face, I doubted it. By the fourth gym session, her guard dropped, and she warmed up. Seducing Michelle was like taking candy from a baby. I was prettier and smarter than any of the losers she'd dated before. Once she started chatting with me, it was clear. She was falling fast. My original plan was to take it slow, savor the game, but juggling my business and her schedule was getting me all riled up. I craved nightly companionship, but time was scarce, and my success rate was taking a hit. One particularly dry spell coincided with Giselle's visit to Michelle. I couldn't stand being around Giselle, and the deprivation gnawed at me. So, I splurged. Hired an expensive girl named Tammy for the weekend. She cost $3,000, but damn, she was worth every penny. A week after Giselle skedaddled, I decided it was time to reel Michelle in. Sunday afternoon, I asked her out. Live performances were off the table thanks to her lousy eyesight, but we had a smorgasbord of other options. We went on a boat ride, had a picnic on the island, hit up an amusement park, and wrapped it all up with a casual dinner. When I kissed her goodnight, she was practically drooling, giddy over the great time she'd had. I laid it on thick, doing everything I knew every woman loved. The clincher was the admiring look she shot me at the club that Tuesday after our date. Michelle's lazy gaze and Coke bottle glasses meant no one would mistake her for a bombshell. But her body? A different story. It was clear she was sculpting it nicely, losing those extra pounds in all the right places since she started hitting the gym. By my estimate, she'd shed at least 3 kilograms already, and with another 5, she'd have guys lining up around the block. Wednesday after our date, I was struggling to keep things platonic. I got an eyeful of her chest while she did some lifts, and that was it for my take-it-slow plan. By Sunday, I was ready to turn up the heat. We had another great date that ended with a late dinner. When we weren't hungry at our usual time, I invited her over for a snack. She agreed, almost too eagerly. The moment we stepped into my apartment, I knew there was no turning back. "Michelle, I lied to you so you would come to my house," I said, taking off her glasses just seconds after the door closed behind us. "The snack that interests me is you." Her response was clumsy, but who cares? She didn't resist, just hesitated, so I took control. That night, Michelle wasn't going anywhere, and she had no desire to. Making love to her was a blast. The next morning, after a trip to the bathroom and a shared shower, she looked at me with that quirky, lazy-eyed grin and giggled. "Thanks, Justin. It was the best night of my life, even if I won't be able to walk properly today." "I should be thanking you. You were amazing," I replied. And just like that, I realized I meant it. Despite my scheming motives, I genuinely enjoyed our night together. I enjoyed it immensely. Surprisingly, the extra 3 to 5 kilograms on her torso and thighs didn't turn me off. Michelle blushed, looking down. "I'm really glad you liked it because I never thought of myself as attractive. However, there's one problem. Well, I don't know how to say this." "Just say it," I grinned, "or I'll drag you back to bed." Her blush deepened. "Well, I don't have much experience, and I don't take pills. I don't want to get pregnant." I cut her off. "I'll swing by the pharmacy on the way to work. You can use Plan B." A puzzled expression crossed her face. "What's Plan B?" I chuckled, thinking she was joking. When her confused look remained, I said, "They're tablets you can buy at any pharmacy. I'll even go with you and pay for them if you want." "Could you really?" she stammered. "Absolutely," I said, beaming. She mirrored my smile. I asked her if we could cut our gym session short by 10 minutes to talk. She readily agreed. After practice, we sat in my car. "Michelle, I really enjoyed Sunday night. I'd like to set up a regular schedule. What do you think?" Oh, yeah, she blurted, then caught herself. What do you mean? I mean, I want you to spend the night with me 3 or 4 times a week. I know you have a roommate, and I don't want to cause trouble. Also, you need to see a doctor about birth control. I'd love to, but are those pills expensive? I always used protection before, and my job's health insurance doesn't cover them. No problem. You bring me the prescription, and I'll take care of it. Do you really want to be intimate with me enough to do this? She asked, surprised. Couldn't you tell how much I enjoyed Sunday? I replied. I'm ashamed to admit it, Justin, but I was so out of it after you did what you did that I didn't notice anything else. Sorry, I laughed. Everything's fine, Michelle. I really liked it. And so began our long-term intimate relationship. I kept messing around with other girls, but it didn't matter much anymore. See, after about a month of being with Michelle 3 or 4 times a week, I realized she wasn't just some girl. She was smart, dedicated, and giving herself to me completely. I was having a blast with Michelle. One day, I rang up my lawyer from Virginia, told her to dig up some dirt on Jimmy Quayle's divorce from Giselle and any other juicy bits she could find. Next day, she tells me the divorce was finalized 6 weeks ago. A few days later, Giselle ties the knot with Brett Quayle, my own brother. And get this, about a year before that, she pops out a baby boy. Now, no shocker here, the divorce terms were ridiculously kind to Giselle. She got all the leftover property, except for half the savings account, which was put in a trust for her. If no one claimed it within a year, it'd go back to her. It was just a few $1,000s, but I didn't want her to have it. So I signed a power of attorney in Jimmy's name, told my lawyer to grab the money, deduct her fee, and hand the rest to the Red Cross. After 2 months of nights with Michelle, I hit a snag. She was head over heels for me, blabbing about it to Giselle. By now, Giselle was emotionally tangled up in my thing with Michelle. I'd hurt Giselle good when I left Michelle, but I didn't want to leave her. Not just yet. Michelle started looking like an innocent bystander in this whole mess. Plus, our almost daily workouts at the gym had transformed her body. She wasn't just not overweight anymore. She was fit. Her hips had this sculpted look. Hot was the word. I agonized over this for a while. Then I figured I'd feel better if I gave Michelle a real gift, something to help her bounce back when I left. My financial goals were within reach, so I could afford what I had in mind. I consulted a bunch of eye doctors and found one in Pacific Heights. Dr. Nose. This guy wasn't just top-rated. He claimed he had a technique for fixing lazy eyes in adults, something all the other surgeons said was a pipe dream. I took Michelle to see Dr. Nose. Michelle had been poked and prodded by Dr. Nose and his crew for nearly an hour when he finally strutted into the room with his prognosis. Michelle's left lazy eye is in bad shape, he said deadpan, and her right eye ain't strong enough to pick up the slack, which is why she's seeing the world like a Picasso painting. The good news? I can fix the right eye no problem and make the left one look almost normal. The bad news? Only about a 30% chance the left eye will actually see like it should, and we only get one shot at this. I took it as a win. Michelle, on the other hand, had tears welling up in her eyes. All right, Doc, how much is it going to set me back and when can we do this? I asked, cutting to the chase. $25,000. Talk to my admin about scheduling. Tell her it's a 2.5-hour job. I'm free in 2 or 3 weeks, usually on Wednesdays and Thursdays, Dr. Nose replied like he was ordering a sandwich. He continued. After the operation, Michelle will need 4 days of bed rest, blindfolded, another 2 days without sunlight, and no funny business or physical activity during those bed rest days. Michelle looked like someone stole her ice cream. I thanked Dr. Nose like he was handing out miracles. Michelle nodded, still processing, and we headed out. When I paid for the visit, I asked the receptionist about booking the surgery. She flipped through her appointment book and said, Wednesday, 2 weeks from tomorrow at 8 a.m., or 3 weeks from this Thursday at 11 a.m. are open. But you got to confirm by tomorrow and put down $10,000 up front. I nodded, smirking to myself. This was going to be interesting. I thanked the receptionist and we headed out. Michelle was quiet on the walk to the car, but the second we got in, she exploded like a firecracker. How could you be so cruel? She shouted. Bringing me here, giving me hope when I can't afford this operation. I'd rather stay in the dark. I've learned to live with it. She started sobbing, covering her face with her hands like she'd just found out her puppy died. I grabbed her wrists and yanked her hands down. Listen, you're having the operation, and I'm paying for it. So stop the drama and plan your time off for surgery and recovery. I let go, fired up the car, and we drove off. Her tears dried up, but she stayed silent all the way to her place. Here's your stop, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Justin, I'm sorry for yelling, but I can't let you pay for it. I just can't. I turned to her, dead serious. You have no choice. If you don't get the operation, I'm gone. Don't test me. I mean it. Then, out of nowhere, I said something even I didn't expect. I want everyone to see how beautiful you are, and your current look hides that. We both sat there, stunned by my words. I quickly added, by tomorrow, when I pick you up, you'll have your time off sorted and tell me which surgery date works. Michelle looked shell-shocked. Whether she was happy or pissed, I couldn't tell. She got out without a word and walked to her apartment without a backward glance. Back at work, my mind was a mess. Originally, this was supposed to be a parting gift to soothe my guilt before ditching her to hurt Giselle. But now, I wondered if I genuinely wanted a real relationship with Michelle. Maybe there was another way to screw over Giselle that didn't involve using Michelle. When I swung by to pick up Michelle that Wednesday night after she clocked out, her smile was like the cat that ate the canary. So, did you manage to get time off for the operation and recovery? I asked, my face set in stone. I still can't believe you're going through with this, but yes, I did it. She chuckled, a hint of disbelief in her eyes. If you're still on board, we can book it 3 weeks from tomorrow. But there's something you should know. Her giggle turned into a low, playful growl. What's that? I asked, eyebrow arched. I'm going to make sure you're so worn out tonight that you might need another operation, she teased, eyes sparkling with mischief. I'll take my chances, I replied, matching her grin. Michelle was true to her word. By morning, I stumbled from the bedroom, every muscle protesting, feeling like I'd gone 12 rounds with a heavyweight. As we prepped to leave, I caught her shoving something under her dress into her travel bag. What's that? I asked, curiosity piqued. Oh, nothing, she replied, cheeks turning crimson. Let me see, I prodded, my tone light but insistent. No, it's personal, she said, gripping her bag tighter. With a quick lunge, I snatched the bag from her, holding it high as she protested and reached for it. Digging inside, I pulled out a purple contraption. What's this? I asked, a wicked grin spreading across my face. Her face went from red to tomato red in seconds. It's a Kegel machine. It, helps strengthen the pelvic floor muscles. I want to be better in bed for you, she mumbled. A light bulb flickered on in my mind, a devious little idea forming. I tried to keep my face neutral as I slipped the machine back into her bag, handing it back to her with a straight face. It works, I said simply, taking her hand as we walked out the door. I booked the surgery that same day at Dr. Nose's office and sent over a $10,000 check as a down payment. Life was sweet. Michelle was going above and beyond to surprise me over the next 2 weeks. She asked if she could move in with me until the surgery was done, planning to return to her place afterward. I was all for it. Those 2 weeks were bliss. Her dedication, plus some impressive Kegel exercises, nearly made me forget my revenge on Giselle. And then, out of nowhere, Michelle dropped a bombshell. After a perfect evening sitting across from each other, she hit me with it. My roommate Katie can help a bit during my recovery, but I need more support. So I've arranged for my sister Giselle to visit with her 16-month-old son, James. She's excited to meet you. What? Was all I could manage, trying to process that Giselle had named her son after me. Wouldn't you like to meet Giselle? She asked, all shy and innocent. The next few minutes were tense. I couldn't outright refuse, but I didn't like it one bit. Sure, my appearance had changed enough that Giselle wouldn't recognize me. I'd bulked up from daily workouts with Michelle, but my voice and some mannerisms hadn't changed. The idea of being around Giselle made me sweat bullets. While I was lost in thought, Michelle dropped another bomb. I was thinking, Justin, could you please rent a bed and crib so Giselle can stay here with you in the living room? My roommate can help at night, but our place is too small. How about a hotel instead? I shot back quickly. She'd be happier staying here. Please, Justin. It's only for the day of the surgery and 4 days after. Once I'm okay with sunlight, I'll come back here to you. If you'll have me after that next love session. She then fell asleep, leaving me stewing in my own thoughts. I was in chaos. This whole plan to use Michelle to hurt Giselle was spinning out of control. Now I had to host the very person I wanted to punish. I had to figure out a new game plan and fast. I lay there all night, eyes wide open, trying to figure out how to avoid having my cheating ex-wife in my apartment during Michelle's surgery and the following 4 days. I needed a worst-case scenario plan. I got Judy, a college researcher who worked for me part-time on the case. Within a few hours, she came through. Justin, there's a technique where a doctor stuffs cotton balls into your nasal passages. As long as you don't leave them in for more than a week, complications are minimal. Dr. Joan Phillips in San Mateo County says it can change your voice by 10 to 20%, Judy explained. Book me an appointment with Dr. Phillips ASAP, I said, barely containing my excitement. Convincing Michelle that Giselle staying with us was a bad idea was like pulling teeth. 2 days after Judy's report, I was in Dr. Phillips's office. She broke down the theory behind her technique, played me some before and after recordings, and gave me a rundown of the costs, which varied depending on the type of cylinders used. Cotton wasn't always the best. Sometimes pricier, harder to insert materials were needed. I scheduled the procedure for the day before Giselle arrived and set up another appointment to undo it 6 days later. My worries eased up thanks to 2 things. First, Michelle didn't recognize my voice on the phone after the procedure. Following Dr. Phillips's advice, I blamed it on allergies. Second, Michelle was so pumped about her upcoming surgery that she looked like a kid who'd won the Halloween, Christmas, and birthday jackpot. Resigned to dealing with my ex-wife for a few nights, I started plotting ways to make myself scarce. I had all sorts of plans to avoid Giselle and her little brat as much as possible. On that fateful Thursday, I drove Michelle to the hospital. My ex-wife, Giselle, was flying in and would catch a cab to Michelle's place, where her roommate Katie would be waiting. I lingered at the hospital until Michelle emerged from recovery, then took her home. As we sat around chatting over Chinese takeout, I was floored that Giselle showed no sign of recognizing me. Michelle, still groggy from surgery, needed rest. So, after dinner, Giselle, her son James, and I headed back to my place, leaving Michelle in Katie's care. The plan was simple. Drop Giselle at Michelle's by 8:30 a.m., just as Katie left for work. Giselle casually mentioned she'd stopped her birth control because she and Brett were trying for another kid. "Brett's been away for 10 days, and I'm here for 4, Giselle laughed. "He better be ready for some intense ball play when I get back." I chuckled politely, but a seed of an idea sprouted in my mind. Katie's strained expression suggested this revelation was news to her, too. We were all beat when we got to my apartment. The living room was spacious but sparsely furnished, just enough space for a double bed for Giselle and a crib for James. I barely interacted with them before we all turned in for the night. As I lay in bed, a plan began to take shape. This was it, the ultimate revenge. Giselle's lingering glances weren't of recognition, but gratitude. She had shown she still harbored feelings for me, and I could use that. The next day, after dropping Giselle and James at Michelle's, I went on a little shopping spree. I bought hidden cameras and some photography backdrops. I also picked up new sheets, bright red, a stark contrast to the white ones I had. Back at my place, I set up the cameras discreetly around my bed, draped the red sheets, and stashed the headboard in the closet. This was it. The stage was set. Giselle had no idea what was coming. I couldn't believe how easy it was to seduce Giselle, like leading a lamb to slaughter. On the evening of Michelle's second day off bed rest, I suggested to Giselle we hit the town to celebrate Michelle's impending new life. I even arranged a neighbor to babysit James, and she bit the bait without a second thought. It took every ounce of my willpower to play nice that night, but the anticipation of what was to come made it bearable. Giselle got drunk, no coaxing needed. The more she drank, the looser her tongue became. And then, amidst the incoherent rambling, came her confession. Her speech was a slur, a jumble of words, but the message cut through the haze. "My biggest regret in life is treating my ex-husband like crap. Should have kept my legs closed when his brother made a move on me. Should have fought to keep our marriage alive. I loved him more than anything. Named my son after him despite my current husband's protests. Never got a chance to explain before he vanished, angry and hurt. Last I heard, he's still alive. Withdrew some court-ordered money from escrow." I nodded along, feigning sympathy. Her drunken revelations were just static in the background of my real motive. Revenge. Sweet, unadulterated revenge on both her and my traitorous ex-brother. When we stumbled back to my apartment, Giselle was so plastered she stripped down right in front of me. Maybe she was trying to provoke me. Maybe she was just that far gone. Either way, it was the cherry on top. I kissed her. At first, she gave a half-hearted resistance, then she leaned into it, showing her true colors by saying, "We have to be careful. Brett and I are planning for another baby." "No problem," I said, grinning. Her face lit up with a smile. I led her to my bedroom. She barely noticed the photo backdrops or the bright lights, only asking, "Are you going to turn off the lights?" "No, I want to see your beautiful body," I replied. That seemed to satisfy her. We made love, and I didn't use protection that night. Afterward, I took a shower. By the time she woke up with a massive hangover, the photo screens were gone, the red sheets replaced, and I was playing it cool. Over breakfast, she tried to kiss me, but I pulled back, feigning surprise. Hush, Giselle, you don't want Michelle to be mad at me for kissing you, do you? After last night, you're worried about a kiss? She asked, utterly confused. Last night? What about last night? I said, pretending to be amazed. Giselle was genuinely baffled. What? You're kidding, right? After I saved you from that guy hitting on you at the bar, I just put you to bed, I said. You must have dreamed it. And if you did, don't tell Michelle. I don't want her thinking there's any chance of anything happening between us, I said sternly. No, this is not what I dreamed, she growled. Inside, I was laughing my head off as we drove silently to Michelle's apartment that morning. That night, I silently high-fived myself when I overheard Giselle telling Michelle that the day we slept together was the start of her most fertile phase. Over the next 2 nights, I managed to avoid too much one-on-one time with Giselle. Soon, she was saying a tearful goodbye to Michelle after Dr. Nose made a house call. Yep, he actually showed up in person to make sure she wasn't exposed to any light while he removed her eye bandages. I even drove Giselle to the airport, casually hugged her and James goodbye, silently hoping she was carrying my baby. Dr. Nose's surgery on Michelle was a game changer. Her left eye now looked almost normal, only suspicious if you knew there was a problem. Her face transformed into something beautiful. Dr. Nose reminded us that her right eye's vision should be 20/30ths after a couple of sun-free days. It'll be at least a month before we know if her left eye will reach 20/40ths or maybe even 20/30ths, he said with a grin. So, fingers crossed. The day Michelle finally stepped out of her darkened apartment, she cried when she saw herself in the mirror at my place with me beside her. Why are you crying, baby? I asked. Now I look so much better than I ever imagined. And now that I can see your face clearly, I can't believe someone as beautiful as you would want to be with me. But mostly, I'm crying because you gave me a new life. She turned to me, planted a passionate kiss, and pressed herself close. The only reason anyone could be as kind to me as you were is if you loved me, Justin. Do you love me? I love you so much it hurts, I said. Wow, I probably should have been prepared for this, but I wasn't. Quickly recovering, I added, Yes, Michelle, I love you, and kissed her. My reasoning was twofold. Giselle's pain would be even worse if I left Michelle now, and despite my best efforts, I might actually be in love with her. After a few minutes of intense kissing, Michelle led me to the bed. I was a bad girl while I was recovering, she said, pouting. How so? I asked. Despite Dr. Nose's warning, I use the machine twice a day. I think I can squeeze a banana now, she giggled. Let's test that theory, I said, eagerly. 5 months after our first post-op intimate encounter, a lot had changed. Michelle's vision in her right eye improved to 20/30ths, and her left eye reached 20/40ths. With contact lenses, she had perfect 20/20ths vision in both eyes, and she looked stunning. Nights with Michelle, thanks to her exercise and her genuine love, were unmatched. I had to admit I was in love with her, so I proposed. She screamed, Yes, 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 as I slipped the ring on her finger. Brett received an anonymous DVD featuring his wife, Giselle, getting busy with some guy on red sheets. My face was a blur of pixels, and nothing in the scene, the bed, the sheets, could link it back to me. From my fiancé, I got the juicy details. Brett's trip while Giselle was in San Francisco got extended another 5 days. She was now clearly pregnant, and if she didn't conceive the day Brett returned, then it was most likely my baby. Brett and Giselle's marriage was on the rocks, probably heading for divorce. Funny how Brett didn't mind cheating on his wife, but when someone else did, it was suddenly a big deal. The bigger issue? Their finances were a train wreck. My parents were struggling to help them, despite their old age and limited means. Michelle quit her job as a hostess at the restaurant. She started taking college courses part-time and helping me at work. Turns out, her poor eyesight was the only thing holding back her sharp mind, and she took to research like a duck to water. My business is booming now that I've gotten my revenge, and I'm a much better man than I was before. Sometimes I even thank Brett and Giselle for being the catalysts they were. 2 years after the chaos in my life began to settle, a call shattered the peace I had painstakingly rebuilt. Brett and Giselle had been in a devastating car crash. Brett didn't make it, and Giselle was in the hospital, fighting for her life. The details were sketchy, but Michelle and I rushed to the hospital immediately. As we arrived at the hospital, the anxiety was palpable. The sterile smell, the hurried footsteps, and the low murmurs of conversations created a tense atmosphere. Michelle squeezed my hand tightly, her worry evident. Despite everything, Michelle had a kind heart, always ready to forgive. I, however, was not so inclined. We were directed to the intensive care unit, where a serious-faced doctor awaited us. His eyes were heavy with the burden of bad news. The stark white walls and the beeping machines made everything feel surreal. "Mr. Reddy," he began, using my new identity, "your sister-in-law, Giselle, is in critical condition. She has suffered severe internal injuries and her liver is failing. We need a liver transplant immediately. Unfortunately, due to her blood type and other factors, there are no suitable donors on the registry. The only potential match we have found is you." I stared at him, the irony of the situation hitting me like a ton of bricks. I could save Giselle, but every fiber of my being screamed against it. She had wrecked my life, and now she needed me to save hers. "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice low and controlled, though my emotions raged inside me. "You're the only viable donor we have at the moment," the doctor explained, not understanding the full history behind my relationship with Giselle. "Without your donation, she won't survive." I glanced at Michelle, her eyes wide with hope and desperation. She knew the turmoil I was in, but she also knew my capacity for compassion. This was a test of my resolve, of everything I had rebuilt. "I can't do it," I said finally, my voice breaking the tense silence. "I have a rare blood disease that prevents me from donating. I can't risk it." The doctor's face fell, but he nodded, accepting my lie without further question. He turned to leave, but Michelle grabbed his arm, her eyes pleading. "Is there no one else? Please, there has to be someone who can help her," she implored. "Not at this time," the doctor said, shaking his head. "We've exhausted all options." As the doctor walked away, Michelle turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "Justin, are you sure? Is there no way you can help?" "No, Michelle, I can't. And even if I could, I wouldn't. I'm sorry. But I have to think about us, about our future," I said, my heart heavy but resolute. The days that followed were a blur. Giselle's condition worsened, and there was nothing anyone could do. Michelle stayed by her side as much as she could, but I kept my distance, unable to reconcile my feelings of revenge and guilt. One evening, as we sat in the hospital cafeteria, Michelle broke the silence. "Justin, I've been thinking. What about James? He's just a baby. He needs someone to care for him." I looked at her, seeing the compassion in her eyes. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we adopt him. He's Giselle's child and he needs a home. We can give him that," she said softly, her hand covering mine. I was taken aback. The thought of raising Giselle's child, a child that was probably mine, was daunting. But as I looked into Michelle's eyes, I saw the future we could build together, a future that included giving this child a chance at a better life. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, searching her face for any doubt. "Yes, I am. We can do this together, Justin. We can give him a family," she said, squeezing my hand. "All right, let's do it," I agreed, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. This was the right thing to do, for James, for Michelle, and for me. We began the adoption process immediately, and within weeks, James was officially part of our family. The transition was not without its challenges, but Michelle and I faced them head-on, determined to give James the love and stability he deserved. As for Giselle, she passed away a few weeks after the accident. Her death was a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the consequences of our actions. Despite everything, I found a sense of closure in knowing that I had moved on, rebuilt my life, and found happiness with Michelle and our new family. James grew up knowing he was loved, surrounded by a family that cherished him. And as I watched him grow, I knew that in choosing to raise him, I had made the right decision. In the end, it wasn't just about revenge or redemption. It was about building a future filled with love and hope. And so we moved forward, leaving the past behind, forging a new path together as a family. The scars of betrayal and pain were still there, but they were overshadowed by the promise of a brighter tomorrow.